Nolan had a knack for such work, and much of it naturally fell to him. "Okay," he said resignedly. "Another day, another world." "My private nightmare," said the skipper with humour, "is bug-eyed monsters. Try not to find 'em here, Nolan, eh?" He'd said that 8 times before on this voyage. Nolan said, "My private nightmare is getting home and finding out that while we've been finding new worlds for men to live on, they've started a war and made Earth a place to die on. Try to arrange that it doesn't happen before we get home, eh?" He'd said that 8 times before on this voyage, too. "I wish us both luck, Nolan," said the skipper. "But that ball out yonder looks plausible as a nest for bug-eyed monsters." He shook his head as he went out. He was still being humorous. Nolan set up his instruments and went to work. As he worked, he tried to thrust away the thoughts that came to everybody on Earth every day. They were as haunting, some light years from Earth, as back at home. There was the base the comms were building on the Moon. The WDA had an observatory there, but the comms were believed to be mounting many more rockets than telescopes. And there was that unsatisfying agreement made between the comms and WDA just before the Lotus took off. Each promised, solemnly, to notify the other of all space takeoffs before they happened. The idea was to prevent a mistake by which a Pearl Harbor-style attack might be inferred when it wasn't really happening. The fact that it could be prepared against was evidence of the kind of tension back on Earth. But the Lotus was far from home. She lay some 70-odd millions of miles out from the Sol-type star Fuanel Alpha, whose third planet Nolan was to look over. He sent off a distance pulse and took angular measurements of the planet's disk. The ratio of polar to equatorial diameters was informative. The polar flattening said that the day lasted about 30 hours, almost like Earth's. The equatorial diameter of 8,200 miles was much like Earth's. The inclination of the axis of rotation indicated seasons, not exaggerated, but much like the seasons on the third planet of Sol. The size of the ice caps indicated the overall planetary temperature. There were clouds. In fact, there was a cloud mass in the southern hemisphere that looked just like an earthly tropic storm, undergoing the usual changes as it went away from the equator. This was very much like Earth. And the dark masses, which were seas. Nolan frowned. Those mud-coloured patches were water, undoubtedly. A narrow band of light filter proved it. But the areas which were neither sea nor cloud mass, there were 3 levels of brightness to be seen on the disk outside the polar areas. One was sea bottom, one was cloud, the other... Nolan fretted a little. There was something wrong. The solid ground surface of the planet was too light in colour. It was such items that a person with a knack for it would notice sooner than a man without the knack. Vegetation should be more clearly midway between sea bottom and a cloud mass in colour. Nolan fitted in the chlorophyll filter. On a planet of a Sol-type sun, vegetation had to use chlorophyll or else. Through this filter, the clouds would show, of course. They were white and reflected all colours of light. But no colour that chlorophyll didn't reflect could pass through the filter. The cloud masses showed clearly. Nothing else appeared. The filters would have shown vegetation. It didn't. It said there wasn't any. Nolan stepped up the magnification. He saw other things. He didn't like them. He got some maximum magnification pictures and interpreted them with increasing grimness. He went to make his report just as the system constants began to reach the skipper. The local sun's mass was 1.3 sols. The solar rotation period was 34 days. There were sunspots of perfectly familiar kinds. The Luriac laws about the size and distribution of planets in a Sol-type system were borne out. One was small, and its sunward side was probably at a low red heat. This was like Mercury. Planet 2, like its analogue Venus in the home system, would be resolutely unoccupiable by man. Planet 4, analogous to Mars, was smaller than 3 and had a very thin atmosphere. There were gas giants in orbits 6 and 7. Then a novelty. Luriac's laws predicted things about fifth planets too. But they had never been verified because fifth planets...
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.